Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And we understand, everybody in the world understand that the situation that take place right now with Ukraine is a grief. It's a very, very big grief for Ukrainians, for Ukraine as a state. It's a very big grief, not just for Ukrainians, but for Russian Federation, for Russian people, for the European Union, of course, and for the European countries. And of course, this is a very big grief for the United States of America, for Americans, and for presidents of the United States of America. And we understand that everybody wants to finish this conflict, and everybody talks about this every day. Some people are saying that this war will be prolonged for another 2-3 years. Some people are saying that this war will be finished before summer. And of course, we want to understand and we want to get this answer to this very simple question. But we understand that nobody knows for sure when exactly this war will be finished. And if you ask my opinion, I would like, and I tried to understand this conflict not due to situation on the ground sometimes. Sometimes it is very important to see and to understand this conflict through the 5 stages of grief, because these 5 stages of grief explains a lot about, let's say, people. This as 5 stages of grief doesn't explain the situation on the ground, but they can explain at least where is Zelensky right now, where is Putin right now, where is Donald Trump right now, at which stage of this grief. And for example, according to the Kubler-Ross model, there are next stages of grief: denial, refusing to accept the reality of the loss. And we remember that, for example, Ukrainians for a very long period of time were located at this stage of grief and telling the truth. And according to my understanding of the situation, the European Union is still there. They are still at the denial stage. For example, there is the second stage is anger. It's frustration and resentment about the situation. Bargaining, trying to negotiate or make deals to change the outcome. We see the key word deals, and we understand who is currently in the world from the political leaders at this stage of grief. Depression, deep sadness and withdrawal as the loss feel overwhelming. As for now, there are not even a single political leader who is at this stage of grief. And of course, acceptance, coming to terms with the reality and finding a way forward. And this is the most important stage of grief. And when every single leader, Donald Trump, Putin, Zelensky, Macron, Starmer, and many other politicals enter this stage of grief, only then we can start talking that the conflict in Ukraine is about to be finished. So let's discuss now in details, and first let's talk, for example, about Zelensky. During the previous 12 hours, he made lots of important statements, and now we understand where exactly Zelensky is located when talking about the stages of grief. Of course, I don't know who is going on inside, but it is Ukrainians who will lose their patience. You understand, because we are under attack, no one else. He was talking and he was answering different statements that were made by the President of the United States of America. Another important statement: where is the pressure? Where are the sanctions? Zelensky again called for pressure on Russia, but this time in South Africa. I don't see right now strong pressure on Russia and any new sanctions packages against it for now, but we really hope. Another important statement: we'd like to have peace through strength that would be used toward Russia. Zelensky not sounding like he's ready for just peace as he chats with Ben Shapiro. He wants the force toward Russia. They're the one who's the aggressor. And the finally important statement is that Zelensky said that Russia wants and desires the destruction of the United States, since all this was laid down in the times of the USSR. According to him, all this was laid down in schools, and now Ukraine is fighting not only for its right, but also for the rights of the states. So based on all these statements, we understand that Zelensky is still at anger stage, frustration and resentment about the situation. And we understand that that there are still many steps he needs to done to make until the end of the conflict. He needs to answer first the bargaining, then depression, and only then Zelensky will be able to accept the reality. And telling the truth, I'm not even sure that Ukraine has enough of time to wait until Zelensky will go through every single step. Once again, when talking about European countries, we understand that they are still at the denial stage because they deny that Crimea is going to become a part of Russia. Only Ukraine can make a decision what kind of ending of the conflict should be between Russia and Ukraine. Now let's talk about the United States of America, because it's very interesting and very important to understand at which stage the United States of America are located right now. The US will demand that Russia recognize Ukraine's right to have its own army and defense industry as a part of peace agreement. Trump's special representative Witkoff intends to discuss this issue with President Putin at their next meeting. The Trump administration also wants Russia to return the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant to Ukraine. In the future, the facility should come under US control to manage the energy supply of both sides. At the same time, the publication's sources report that details of the plans are not yet final and may change. So let's talk about several statements that were made by Donald Trump himself, because then it will understand the situation much better. Donald Trump stated that Trump does not believe that Russia is preventing the conclusion of a ceasefire agreement. Important meetings are expected. There is a lot of progress, and the American president notes. It will be very difficult to return Crimea to Ukraine. It was transferred to Russia under Obama. Russia's concessions is to end the war and refuse to completely take over the entire territory of Ukraine. Trump also said that he would prefer to answer the questions about possibility of tightening sanctions against Russia in a week. The question about the US withdrawing from the Ukraine negotiations is the absence of a deal should be asked in 2 weeks. So another important thing that Trump said that he had set a deadline for himself on a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine, but he did not disclose the date. Trump did not specify what would happen if Ukraine did not agree to an agreement before the deadline. So nobody knows what is going to happen, but I must say that after deadline, most likely Donald Trump and the United States of America in this conflict will enter the depression stage, almost pre-final stage before the stage of acceptance. Now Donald Trump is at bargaining. He is trying to get as much as possible. He states at the beginning also denied the situation. Then the United States of America were very angry with the Russian behavior, and they were sending a lot of weapons, lots of arms. Crimean Bridge was destroyed several times, attack missiles, long-range missiles, everything was sent to Ukraine, and that was a part of anger. Now Donald Trump came to power, and the United States of America entered the bargaining, trying to get as much as possible from the situation and to finish the conflict. But once again, when Ukraine reject this peace deal, most likely Donald Trump will enter depression. And then the United States will enter the acceptance stage. And of course, now it's very important to understand at what stage the Russian Federation. And talking about the Russian Federation, as for me, I understand that the Russian Federation is already at the acceptance stage. Because the Russians basically suffered this grief not during the special military operation. The Russians suffered this huge grief in 2014 when they lost control over Ukraine. This was the huge grief for them 10 years ago. And during the previous 10 years, the Russians silently was walking through every single stage, through denial, through the bargaining, through anger, through depression, and through acceptance. And as for now, the Russians entered the acceptance stage before the beginning of the special military operation. Before the beginning of this war, the Russians accepted that they lost control over Ukraine. This is the reality. And when they realized that they lost control over Ukraine, they realized that it's time to get as much as possible. And now everything that we can see is not grief even for the Russian Federation. It's the new reality they're trying to build and they're trying to create. Now let's move to the line of combat contact and let's understand what is the situation right now. And according to information we have, the Russians are finishing the battle for the settlement of Gornal, which is located in the Sumy direction. This information was confirmed by several icons and several videos. For example, this video was published by pro-Russian resources, and in this video we can see how the armed forces of the Russian Federation were entering the eastern and the northeastern parts of the settlement of Gornal. Based on this video, this territory was adjusted in the Russian favor. And later, several pro-Russian resources right before we started making this video reported that the Russian armed forces have liberated the main part of the settlement of Gornal. In the Kursk border region, the Ukrainian armed forces are retreating to the border. So now the Ukrainians are trying to keep their forces as close as possible to this territory, because from this territory the Ukrainians are planning to retreat further in the western directions towards the next huge forest. So the Russians are about to finish the battle for the southern part, and then they will try to finish the battle for the northwestern. So as you can see, the Russians promised to clear the Kursk direction before the May's holidays, and most likely the Russians will be able to do this. And this is going to be obviously a very huge media victory for the Russians. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Liman direction. From this area we got just one video. Most likely the Ukrainians managed to stabilize the situation in this area. The Ukrainians managed to reinforce their positions on the territory of the settlement of Redkadub, and the Russians, that's why, decided not to be in a hurry. Currently the Russians are trying to destroy the temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine along the entire village. Obviously it will take some time for the Russians until they're able to clear this village, and only then the Russians will resume their attempts to attack. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Konstantinovka direction. Another day, another icons, another batch of icons with flags, which means that the Russians continue offensive. But today we also have icons with the Ukrainian flags. Now let's discuss everything in details. And first let's talk about the city of Chasiv Yar. According to several pro-Russian resources, very reliable pro-Russian resources, as a result of offensive operation, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to establish complete control over the northwestern part of the settlement of Chasiv Yar. So the battle for this part ended, and the Russians came as a winner from these battles. Now the Russians will have enough of time and enough of resources to finish the battle for the central part. So due to the loss of the northwestern part from the Ukrainian side, we believe that the battle for the central part will intensify, and the Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back from this part of the city of Chasiv Yar, probably even before May's holidays. And furthermore, the Russians may try to establish complete control over the city of Chasiv Yar also before the 9th of May. There are still lots of days before this holiday. Now let's talk about the city of Terezk. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions in the northern part to the north of the city of Terezk. We have lots of icons, lots of proofs how Ukrainians were attacking Russian soldiers in this area, and based on these episodes we have adjusted this part. At the same time, several pro-Ukrainian resources reported, several neutral resources reported that Ukrainians counterattacked once again in the direction of the Zabalka micro district, and several sources reported that Ukrainians managed to answer this micro district once again. So this is how the map looked like yesterday, and this is how the map looked like today. Also, the Ukrainians counterattacked in the northern part of the city of Terezk and restored control over the bus station. So we see that Ukrainians are trying to slow the Russians down and to force them to fall back. This is very important for the Ukrainians because they understand that the Russians are advancing from the south, and that this pocket could be taken very fast if Russians are able to hold the northern part of the city of Chasiv Yar under complete control of the city of Terezk. Today we continue receiving more videos how the Russians were bombing and attacking the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in the vicinity of Kliban-Byk and Kliban-Byk reservoir. So we see that the Russians intensify their activities, and today most likely we're going to receive additional videos from this area. Now let's talk about the Stara Nikolaevka. Today several resources, including pro-Ukrainian resources, reported that the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly, and that the first Russian troopers managed to enter the village of Stara Nikolaevka from the south. This wasn't confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources, and this is very important. As for now, the pro-Ukrainian sources colored the southern part of Stara Nikolaevka as a gray zone, but we expect that upcoming day we're gonna have additional changes, and maybe we're gonna receive first geolocations. At the same time, the Russians continue bombing the positions of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of the village of Zarya. and the Russians continue offensive operation around the settlement of Tarasovka. This information was also confirmed by pro-Ukrainian sources and by neutral sources. So we see that the Russians continue offensive despite the fact that Ukrainians are trying to stabilize the situation in the direction no matter what. As for the South Donetsk direction, according to information we have, the Russians are trying to break through Ukrainian defense through the fields between the villages of Razdolne and Atradne. According to several pro-Russian reliable resources, during the previous day, during the previous night, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly and to get a bit closer to the settlements of Atradne and Bogatyr from the south and from the southwest. The pro-Russian resources report that the Russians are trying to encircle these two villages and to cut the Ukrainians in cauldron. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join your Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.